In my 20 years as a homicide detective, I thought I'd seen it all. I've stepped over bodies still warm from the final breath, zipped up children who never had a chance to grow old, and stood face to face with killers who looked me in the eye without a trace of shame. But there's one case that I keep coming back to, not because it was the bloodiest, or the most twisted, but because it blurred the line between love and survival, truth and delusion. Her name was Eleanor Hayes. She was 62 years old. A widow. A retired librarian who lived alone in a well-kept Spanish-style home on the quieter edge of Tampa. Her neighbors knew her for her gardenias, her Sunday crossword ritual, and the lemon squares she brought to church potlucks. She had raised 3 children. All grown. All scattered across different states with lives of their own. Her husband, Gerald Hayes, died 7 years prior from pancreatic cancer. She had stood by him the whole way, through the chemo, the hair loss, the appointments, the silence. She'd buried herself in devotion so completely that by the time she laid him to rest, there was nothing left of her to bury. She didn't date after that. Didn't try to move on. She found comfort in routine, books, gardening, old movies, the occasional letter from her children. She had accepted, quietly and completely, that her story was already written. But time has a way of wearing down even the steadiest lives. And behind the tidy house and the polite smiles, Eleanor carried a loneliness that grew thicker each year. She never said it out loud. But every now and then, her neighbor would catch her staring just a little too long at couples walking hand in hand. Or lingering on a love story at the book club a little longer than usual. Then came Miami. 5 years after Gerald's death, Eleanor took a weekend trip with 2 old friends to a luxury resort in South Beach. It was the first real vacation she'd taken in over a decade. She bought a new sun hat. Got her nails done. Packed the nice dress she hadn't worn since her daughter's wedding. It was supposed to be nothing more than a getaway. That's where she met Travis Reed. He was 26. A bartender at the poolside bar. Tan, smooth-talking, quick with compliments and slow smiles. He had a voice like warm syrup and a way of leaning in just enough to make a woman feel like she was the only person in the world. He poured her a mojito and said, "You've got the most peaceful eyes I've ever seen." Eleanor laughed. She hadn't been flirted with like that in 20 years. What started as harmless poolside banter turned into late-night walks on the beach, hours of conversation about dreams, regret, and second chances. Travis listened, really listened. He remembered the names of her kids. Asked questions. Shared stories about losing his parents young, about growing up fast, about never feeling rooted. By the time Eleanor returned to Tampa, her mind was still in Miami. And somehow, Travis followed. Texts turned into phone calls. Phone calls turned into weekend visits. Within weeks, he was staying with her more often than not. He started doing little things around the house, changing light bulbs, fixing a leaky faucet, playing old jazz records while she cooked dinner. He brought flowers home, just because. When he kissed her hand, he made it feel sacred. And then, just 1 month after meeting her, he proposed. "Age is just a number," he whispered, holding her hand. "I've never felt this connected to anyone in my life." Eleanor said yes. Her children were horrified. Michelle, the oldest, called him a con artist. Daniel, her youngest, said it flat out, "He's a gold digger, Mom. This is insane." But Eleanor stood her ground. "He sees me," she said. "Not my age, not my bank account, me." 2 weeks later, they were married. A small ceremony in the backyard, beneath the old oak tree that Eleanor had planted with Gerald when they bought the house. Travis wore a pale gray suit. Eleanor wore ivory. No guests. No music. Just the wind and the quiet click of a camera timer. She told her sister over the phone that it was the happiest day of her life. But happiness, it turned out, had an expiration date. 3 months later, Travis disappeared. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Eleanor remembered it clearly. He kissed her on the forehead before sunrise, said he was heading out for a solo fishing trip along the coast, and promised he'd be back before lunch. She made his favorite omelette. Waited. Cleaned the kitchen. Waited some more. By dusk, there was still no sign of him. She called his phone. Straight to voicemail. By 9 p.m., Eleanor called the sheriff's office. "My husband's missing," she said, voice trembling. "He went fishing this morning and hasn't come back." The next day, his boat was found drifting off the Tampa Bay coast. Motor still running. Anchor line snapped. His phone, sunglasses, and wallet were still inside. But no Travis. No signs of a struggle. No distress call. No overturned boat. Just silence. The media ran the story for a week. "Newlywed lost at sea," they said. But Daniel Hayes wasn't buying it. He hadn't trusted Travis from day one. He'd looked into his eyes and seen something off. Too smooth. Too perfect. Like someone playing a part too well. And now, with no body, no real evidence, and too many unanswered questions, Daniel's instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. And Daniel wasn't the kind of man to ignore his gut. I met Daniel Hayes in my office the day after the Coast Guard found Travis Reed's boat. He didn't make small talk. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. The man was all clenched fists and sleepless eyes. And when he spoke, it wasn't with fear. It was with certainty. "He's not dead," Daniel said. "He didn't drown. He ran." I remember looking him over, jeans stained with grease, shirt half-tucked, jaw grinding hard enough to crack a tooth. "You think he staged the whole thing?" "I don't think," he said. "I know." What Daniel had with him was more than a theory. He came prepared, printouts, records, reverse phone lookups. I've worked with detectives who don't prep that thoroughly. He laid it all out across my desk like evidence in a courtroom. The first red flag? Travis Reed didn't exist prior to 2 years ago. No social security number. No high school. No work history beyond the bartending gig. Daniel had run his mother's new husband's phone number through an online database and gotten a hit on a completely different name, Colin Meyer. That name was attached to 2 fraud reports out of Alabama and Mississippi. Different identities. Same story. Older women. Sudden romance. Quick cohabitation. Financial access. Then, vanished. Daniel kept going. There was also a Jordan Keller. A Lucas Raymond. And a third alias that gave me chills, Ethan Cross. All linked to the same face. The same voice. The same smooth act. There were photos from dating profiles, vacation photos found through reverse image searches, and message threads from women who had posted warnings online, buried in support forums and comment sections titled things like, "I fell for a liar," and, "Beware this man." Different names. Same eyes. Same smile. Same tactic. Daniel looked at me and said, he was never planning to stay. He was setting her up. And now he's either vanished on purpose, or someone helped him disappear. That's when I started to believe him. We launched a quiet investigation. First stop was the marina. I had our techs pull every second of surveillance footage from the morning of Travis's so-called fishing trip. It didn't take long to spot the problem. There was no footage of Travis arriving. No car. No walk to the docks. Nothing. No sign of Travis anywhere near that water. But the boat had left. At least that's what we assumed, until we realized something else. The fishing gear Eleanor said he left with? Still in the garage. Neatly stacked behind storage bins. Untouched. We showed Eleanor the footage. Asked her about the gear. Her face went pale. He said he was going fishing, she whispered. I watched him take the bag. But she hadn't. She remembered the kiss. The way he touched her cheek. The way he said, "Be back by lunch." But the bag? No. That was a detail she'd filled in. Because she needed it to make sense. We checked his bank records. Over the 8 weeks leading up to his disappearance, Travis had made small cash withdrawals from their joint account. Never enough to raise suspicion. A few hundred here. 1,000 there. But the week before he vanished? $8,000. Withdrawn in Sarasota. An hour south. Daniel hadn't known Travis ever went there. That detail hit him like a punch in the chest. Then we found the will. Filed just 2 weeks before the disappearance. Notarized, official. It left everything, Eleanor's home, her retirement accounts, her insurance policy, to Travis. Her children weren't even mentioned. Daniel brought the copy to my office himself. His hands trembled as he laid it down. Not out of fear, out of disbelief. She gave him everything, he said. And now he's gone. And she's grieving a man who doesn't exist. It wasn't until the neighbor came forward that things took a darker turn. His name was Carl Whitaker. 78. Retired Navy. Lived 2 doors down. Told us he'd seen Eleanor outside one night about a week after Travis's disappearance. Thought she was planting something, Carl said. Digging under that big oak tree. When I asked if she'd planted roses there before, Carl shook his head. Nope. But that's where they got married. Right under that tree. I remember because I thought it was sweet. That big old tree, she said it was planted the year they moved in. Been through storms. Hurricanes. Never lost a branch. We got a warrant. Executed it quietly on a Saturday morning. Eleanor answered the door in a robe. What's going on? She asked. No one answered. We went to the tree. 4 feet down, we hit tarp. Blue plastic, tied tight with nylon rope. The smell hit first. If you've worked homicide, you know that smell. Sweet. Sour. Something ancient. Something final. We unwrapped him slowly. Fishing line tangled in the fingers. Wedding band on the ring finger. The jawline, even in death, was unmistakable. Travis Reed was dead. He hadn't drowned. He'd been struck in the head, blunt force trauma. Then suffocated, plastic bag over the mouth and nose. He'd been buried before sunrise. Not an accident. Not a vanishing. A murder. We arrested Eleanor on the spot. 2nd-degree murder. Concealment of a corpse. Obstruction. She collapsed when she saw the body bag. Not from guilt. From devastation. Because in that moment, Eleanor Hayes wasn't a killer. She was a woman who just realized the man she thought had left her, had never left at all. He was in her backyard the whole time. Dead. And someone had put him there. We held Eleanor in custody overnight. That's standard. 2nd-degree murder isn't a charge you toss around lightly. But something about the way she sat in that cell, shoulders collapsed inward, lips trembling with disbelief, it didn't line up with the image of someone who buried her husband under a tree. I've seen killers fake grief. But this wasn't that. This wasn't an act. Eleanor didn't know Travis was dead. That was the first truth that rang clear in my mind. The second came less than 24 hours later. Daniel Hayes walked into the precinct just after noon. Same clothes as the day before. Eyes red. Pale as chalk. He wasn't angry now. He wasn't pacing or throwing accusations. He looked hollow. He asked to speak to me privately. said it couldn't wait. We took him to interview room 3, the one with the one-way glass, the rusted chair legs, the camera that never blinks. I sat across from him and waited. He didn't ask for a lawyer. Didn't ask for leniency. He just started talking. It wasn't supposed to happen that way, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. He told me about the night it all fell apart. He had stopped by his sister Michelle's house earlier in the evening. He was furious. Ranting about the will, about how their mother had been manipulated. Michelle told him to calm down. Told him Eleanor was a grown woman, that she could make her own choices. She gave him everything, Daniel said. And Michelle, already tired, already worn from months of arguing, told him the truth he couldn't swallow. She doesn't need your protection, Daniel. Maybe she just wants to feel loved again. Daniel stormed out. He didn't drive home. He drove to Eleanor's house. He parked 2 houses down, where the street lamps didn't reach. He still had a key. The front porch was lit, the house quiet. He knew where the creaky boards were, he'd grown up stepping around them. He let himself in through the back door. The house smelled like it always did. Lavender. A hint of wine. The sound of jazz playing softly from the living room stereo. He walked past the kitchen. He saw the omelet still sitting in the pan. Untouched. Then he heard a voice from the garage. He stepped inside. Travis was on the phone. Daniel couldn't hear the whole conversation. But one line cut through the air like a blade. Once she signs the house over, we're out. She won't fight it. She's all in. Daniel froze. The room spun. He stepped forward. Travis turned. Didn't flinch. Didn't look scared. He looked amused. You shouldn't be here, Travis said. Daniel clenched his fists. What are you doing to her? Travis smiled. That same plastic smile Daniel had hated from the beginning. She's happy, Travis said. Probably for the first time in years. I'm giving her something none of you ever did. You're stealing from her, Daniel said. No, Travis replied, calm as ever. She's giving it to me. Big difference. That was it. Daniel doesn't remember picking up the wrench. It had been lying on the workbench next to a box of old tools, his father's tools. Real tools. Honest, heavy, American-made. The kind a man builds a life with. The first swing was instinct. The second was rage. The third he barely remembered. When it was over, Travis was on the floor. Motionless. Blood soaking the concrete. Silence filling the space like water in a sealed room. Daniel stood there for what felt like hours. Then he wrapped the body in the blue tarp Travis had bought during hurricane season. Tied it with rope. Dragged it to the backyard. The oak tree. The same one Eleanor and Travis had stood under 3 months before, holding hands and whispering vows. That's where Daniel dug. 4 hours. His hands blistered. His chest heaving. He didn't cry. Not yet. He didn't wake his mother. Didn't call 911. Because deep down, he believed no one would believe him. Not the police. Not his family. Not even her. And maybe worse, he feared she'd still choose Travis. So he buried the body. Packed the earth. Washed his hands in the utility sink. And left before sunrise. He told me everything in one sitting. Didn't pause. Didn't defend. Didn't ask if he was going to prison. He already knew. I told him Eleanor had been arrested. That she'd collapsed when she saw the body bag. Daniel went silent for a long time. Then he said, I thought it would protect her. I thought if the story was that he vanished at sea, she could just move on. I asked him why he turned himself in. He looked me in the eye and said, because she doesn't deserve to carry this. And I can't carry it alone anymore. We arrested him on the spot. He didn't resist. Didn't flinch. He asked only one thing, that we let him speak to his mother before the lawyers came in. We arranged it. It wasn't like in the movies. There were no tears through glass, no last-minute revelations. Just two people sitting across from each other, separated by a wall of shame and grief. "I'm sorry," Daniel whispered. Eleanor didn't answer. Not right away. She just stared at him. At the boy she had once rocked to sleep. At the man who had killed for her. At the son she thought she knew. There was no trial. Daniel Hayes pled guilty to second-degree murder. He waived his right to a jury. Waived his right to fight. Said he didn't want to drag anyone else through more pain. He accepted the plea deal like a man stepping into a fire he knew he'd lit himself. 25 years. That was the sentence. No possibility of parole until year 15. It could have been worse. But even if they'd offered 10, I don't think Daniel would have taken it. He wasn't bargaining for freedom. He was surrendering to consequence. The courtroom was quiet when the judge read the sentence. I was there. So was Eleanor. She sat in the second row, hands clutched in her lap like she was trying to hold something broken together. Her daughter Michelle sat beside her, face pale and tight, trying to be a pillar. When the judge asked Daniel if he had anything to say, he didn't look at the courtroom. He looked only at his mother. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just want her to live free, even if I never do again." His voice didn't shake. But hers did. She reached out for him instinctively, like any mother would, forgetting the metal rail and the bailiff standing between them. He didn't flinch. He just nodded once before they took him away. Outside, the press was waiting. Cameras flashing. Reporters shouting. Eleanor kept her head down. Michelle guided her to the car. "It's over," Michelle whispered. But Eleanor knew better. It wasn't over. Not for Daniel. Not for her. Not for any of them. It would never really be over. Just quieter. The days that followed moved in slow motion. Eleanor returned home for the first time in weeks. She didn't go into the garage. Couldn't bring herself to look at the concrete floor where Travis had died. She didn't step into the backyard either. The oak tree stood tall and indifferent. A silent witness to everything. She pulled the curtains closed. Left them that way. Neighbors avoided her at first. Then came the casseroles. The flowers. The pitying looks over the hedge. She hated all of it. She stopped going to church. Stopped answering the phone. Stopped baking. Michelle came by twice a week with groceries and to help clean. She never stayed long. Eleanor didn't talk much. Just small answers. Soft nods. Eyes that never quite met anyone else's. The worst part wasn't the loss. It was the echo. The weight of absence. Travis was gone. Yes. But so was Daniel. And so was any version of herself that still believed in second chances. One morning, Eleanor found herself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a photograph of Daniel when he was 10, missing a front tooth, holding a red and yellow kite, cheeks flushed from the wind. She remembered that day. She'd packed peanut butter sandwiches and juice boxes. They'd laughed. They'd run through the grass. He'd looked back at her, eyes wide with joy, and shouted, "I did it, Mom." That memory hit her harder than the funeral ever had. Because that boy, that version of her son, was gone too. Lost to the years she hadn't seen him slipping. To the silence between them that grew thicker after Gerald died. To the pain he'd carried quietly until it exploded in blood. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She walked the house like a ghost. Eventually, she ended up in Daniel's old room. Nothing had changed. Same bookshelf. Same posters. Same lamp with the little burn mark from the time he tried to sneak a candle in. She sat on the bed, picked up a stuffed dog he'd named Captain, and wept for the first time in weeks. Not for Travis. Not even for herself. For him. For Daniel. For the boy who had always tried to keep her safe, even when it meant becoming something he didn't recognize. He wrote her letters. One every week. Long, honest letters. She kept them in a box. Didn't open them at first. Couldn't. But eventually, she did. One began like this. Mom. I don't know if I deserve to call you that anymore. But I hope someday you'll remember the parts of me that were still good. Another read. I thought I was protecting you. But I think I was really trying to save the part of me that still believed I could. She read each one in silence. Never responded. Not because she didn't want to. But because she didn't know how. Grief is strange. Sometimes it doesn't roar. It just settles in your bones like a weight you stop noticing until it breaks something inside you without warning. She began writing letters too. Not to send. Just to write. Some to Daniel. Some to Gerald. Some to herself. She ended one simply with, I loved him. But I should have seen what love was costing me. After the sentencing, Eleanor didn't leave the house for nearly a month. She stopped opening the curtains. Stopped checking the mailbox. Stopped answering Michelle's calls, even though her daughter never stopped trying. The food Michelle dropped off went untouched. The tea grew cold in the kettle. The garden, once her pride, wilted under Florida heat. Weeds crept over the flower beds like they knew no one was watching anymore. It was like the house had become a waiting room for something Eleanor couldn't name, not death, not grief, but some unbearable in-between. Michelle begged her to move in. Offered the guest room. Said the grandkids missed her. But Eleanor always said the same thing. This is my place. And what she meant was, this is where everything ended. She finally stepped outside the day they came to remove the oak tree. A team of workers in orange vests. Chainsaws. Ropes. A lift truck. She stood at the window, arms crossed, watching them sever the limbs one by one. It took hours. But when the trunk finally cracked and fell, the ground trembled, like even the roots had been holding their breath. She didn't cry. Just turned away and closed the blinds. The silence afterward was almost worse. That tree had been part of everything, planted the year she and Gerald bought the house, grown through storms and birthdays and heartbreaks. Her children learned to ride bikes under its shade. Gerald built a tree swing there. And then, all those years later, she stood beneath it in an ivory dress and said, I do, to a man who never truly loved her. Now the tree was gone. And what was left? A patch of dirt. A hollow backyard. And a woman who didn't know how to begin again. Daniel adjusted faster than most inside. He wasn't violent. Wasn't loud. Didn't join a gang or hide in the chapel. He read books. Taught GED classes to younger inmates. Signed up for therapy. He never denied what he did. But he also never let himself believe he was past saving. Sometimes, I'd get updates from the prison. I still had friends inside. They'd tell me he kept a photo of his mother in his locker, a copy of that same kite picture Eleanor had sat with so many nights. And that he never talked about Travis. Not once. When asked why he did what he did, he'd say, it doesn't matter now. The point is that I did it. But sometimes I wondered if he really believed that. Or if he was just afraid of the full truth, that part of him didn't regret it. That part of him thought it was justice. Michelle held the family together as best she could. She raised her own kids, kept her job, helped Eleanor with the mortgage payments when she could. But even she admitted, years later, that something in her mother never came back. She became a ghost, Michelle told me once. Like a shadow of the woman who raised us. She tried everything. Got Eleanor a therapist. Brought her to a painting class. Even convinced her to attend one of the local senior meetups, just once. But Eleanor sat through it like she was somewhere else. The other women talked about bridge and grandkids and yoga. Eleanor didn't say a word. When it ended, she walked out quietly and never went back. Michelle stopped pushing after that. She knew grief wasn't something you could cure with casseroles and coloring books. Sometimes, all you can do is stand close. Even if the person you love won't reach back. 2 years after the sentencing, Eleanor sold the house. Packed up everything she hadn't already given away. Donated the books. Let the furniture go cheap. Took only what fit in the back of her car, a suitcase, a box of photos, and that metal tin where she kept all of Daniel's letters. She moved into a small apartment across town. A one-bedroom above a retired carpenter who played old vinyl jazz records on the weekends. The place was quiet. Anonymous. She liked it that way. No more neighbors who watched her too closely. No more reporters hoping for a follow-up story. No more oak tree. Just her and a cat she adopted from the shelter. One eye missing. Torn ear. She named him Clement. I figured he knew something about surviving, she once said when I asked. On Sundays, Michelle brought over groceries. Sometimes her kids came too. They played board games, watched cartoons, told stories from school. Eleanor smiled, said thank you, gave hugs. But her eyes always looked elsewhere, like she was watching the wind instead of the world. Once, her granddaughter Natalie, just 10 years old, asked her. "Grandma, did you ever fall in love after Grandpa?" Eleanor paused for a long time. She'd rehearsed the answer in her head many times over the years. Finally, she said, yes. Once. Natalie tilted her head. What happened? Eleanor smiled faintly. It changed everything. That was all she said. And that was all she needed to. Prison has a way of making men either harder or more honest. Daniel Hayes didn't grow harder. He grew quieter. More reflective. He wrote almost every day, filling notebooks with thoughts he never shared, sentences he scratched out, and truths he didn't know how to carry. One of those letters eventually found its way to me. It was never sent to Eleanor. He gave it to his therapist, who gave it to the chaplain, who handed it off to a mutual contact. I was the last stop. I wasn't sure why I deserved to read it. But I did. And I've never forgotten the words. Mom. I've written and rewritten this letter more times than I can count. Every version feels wrong. Every time I think I've found the right way to say it, I hear your voice in my head, and it all falls apart again. I'm sorry. Not just for what I did. But for everything I didn't say. For the nights I heard you crying behind the bathroom door and didn't knock. For pretending I didn't see you disappearing after Dad died. For blaming you when you couldn't smile the way you used to. I keep thinking about that night. Not just the moment in the garage, but everything that led up to it. The dinners we didn't eat together. The way I rolled my eyes when you brought up book club. The way I let you drift away, thinking you were fine, when I should have seen you were drowning in silence. Travis didn't fool you because you were weak. He fooled you because you needed to believe in something again. I saw that. And instead of warning you gently, I got angry. I yelled. I judged. And then. I killed him. I didn't go there that night planning to do it. I just wanted to talk. But he smirked, Mom. He said you were handing everything over and that I should just get out of the way. It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them. Like you were already gone. And something in me snapped. I picked up the wrench because I didn't know what else to do. I wish I'd walked out. I wish I'd screamed. But I didn't. I buried him under the tree you loved. And for weeks, I watched you grieve a man I knew would never come back. When they arrested you, I couldn't breathe. Because I knew, the moment I stayed silent, I turned you into something you weren't. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't think I can forgive myself. I just want you to know that even after everything, you're still the only person who ever made me feel like I was worth something. You once told me love makes us brave. You were right. Even now, I hope someday you'll remember me not for what I did, but for who I was before I lost that bravery. Your son. Daniel. I kept the letter. Folded it carefully. Stored it with my notes from the case. Part of me wanted to give it to Eleanor. But part of me knew she wasn't ready to read it. Not yet. Eleanor's apartment was small, but full of quiet traces of memory. Photos lined the mantel, one of Gerald in his workshop, one of Michelle's wedding, one of the kids at the lake when they were young. But there was only one photo of Daniel. That same one. The kite. The missing tooth. The mother and son hand in hand. She kept it in a silver frame beside her bed. The letter stayed in the box. She never said why. But one Sunday, Michelle asked her, gently, if she still loved him. Eleanor didn't answer right away. She poured tea. Sat down. Then said, "Of course I do. But I don't know if he loves himself." Not yet. Michelle nodded. Then asked, "Do you blame yourself?" Eleanor stared at the steam rising from her cup. "I don't know what to blame," she said. My heart? My loneliness? My silence? I let a man come into our lives because I wanted to feel something again. I closed my eyes to everything that didn't fit the dream. She looked out the window then. It had started to rain. "He tried to save me," she whispered. "But he shouldn't have had to." That's the moment Michelle understood. This wasn't just a story of a murder. It was a story of all the ways people fall apart without ever raising their voice. Daniel never asked for a reduced sentence. He never filed an appeal. But 5 years into his time, something changed. He began speaking to schools, through video sessions, with the prison's blessing. He talked about family, manipulation, control. Not the crime itself, but the lead-up. The warning signs. The red flags. He didn't call it redemption. Didn't pretend it was penance. He called it, simply, honesty too late. I watched one of those sessions once. He ended it with, "You can love someone without seeing clearly. You can want to protect someone and still lose them. But if you don't speak the truth, even when it hurts, you might bury more than just regret." That stuck with me. Because that's the thing no one tells you about justice. It doesn't always feel like closure. Sometimes, it feels like standing at a locked door, holding a key that no longer fits. There's a man who lived 2 doors down from Eleanor. Calvin Rhodes. 78, Vietnam vet, Navy for 16 years, retired postal worker after that. The kind of man who sat on his porch every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, coffee in hand, dog at his feet. He saw everything. Didn't talk much. Just watched. I interviewed him during the investigation, when we were still trying to piece together a timeline. I remember his face, worn, wind-burnt, a little sun-spotted. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from what he was about to tell me. "I saw him digging," he said. "The boy. The one she married. It was late. After midnight. He had a shovel. Not a trowel. Not garden tools. A damn shovel. Why didn't you call us? I asked. He looked down. Shrugged. What would I have said, detective? That a man was landscaping at night? He rubbed the back of his neck. I told my wife. She said I was being nosy. Said I always looked for trouble. And now? I asked. He didn't answer for a while. Then said, now I wish I'd knocked on her door. Sometimes, the difference between witness and bystander is only 5 seconds of courage. Calvin gave a statement. We thanked him. But that wasn't what stuck with me. It was what he said as I walked away. Some stories, he called out, aren't just about who swung the wrench. They're about all the people who heard the silence and walked away. After the oak tree was gone, Eleanor tried to go on. Not move on, go on. There's a difference. She cleaned. She read. She volunteered briefly at a second-hand bookstore until the local paper ran a feature on Tampa's most shocking crimes, and someone recognized her face. After that, she stopped going. People whispered. Some pointed. Some crossed the street. No one said anything cruel, not directly, but it didn't matter. Grief can heal in time. Shame doesn't always. She gave an interview once, short, private, to a student journalist doing a piece on the psychology of loss. It was never published. But the transcript made its way to my desk eventually, and I read it. I'll never forget what she said when asked what she wanted people to remember about her. Not that I married a con man, she said. Not that my son killed him. I want to be remembered as someone who loved too much, and lost everything because of it. Not a killer. Not a fool. Just someone who got caught in the crossfire between hope and fear. And isn't that most of us? I drove past her apartment building one afternoon years later. There was no name on the buzzer. No welcome mat. Just a worn second-story window with the curtain drawn halfway, and a ceramic cat on the sill. I thought about knocking. But I didn't. Some silences don't need to be filled. Some people are surviving the only way they know how, by staying invisible. Eleanor had stopped speaking publicly. She declined every interview, refused every request to tell her side. She didn't want to become a spectacle. Or a victim. Or a symbol. Just a woman. An aging woman with a past too heavy to carry in the open. A woman who once said, I do, beneath a tree that would one day become a grave. Michelle called me once after that. Said Eleanor had been quiet lately. Quieter than usual. Said she didn't cry anymore. Didn't talk about Daniel. Didn't mention Travis. Just sat in her chair and stared at the same photo of the boy with the kite. She's not dying, Michelle said. But I think a part of her already has. I told her the truth. I think a part of her died the night she realized what Daniel did for her. And the rest has been fading since. It wasn't a comforting answer. But it was an honest one. Eleanor never remarried. Never dated. Never even entertained the idea. The wedding band Travis gave her, a simple silver ring with the words, "Forever begins now," engraved on the inside, stayed in a box in the back of her closet. She opened that box once a year. Not to mourn. But to remember how easily forever can become a lie. The last time Eleanor saw Daniel was on a rainy Sunday in January, 7 years after the sentencing. She hadn't visited the prison in years. Not because she didn't want to, but because she hadn't known what to say. Words are fragile things when you've already lost so much. But that Sunday, she got up before the sun. Made tea she didn't drink. Fed the cat. Dressed in the same coat she wore to Travis's funeral. Then she drove 3 hours to a correctional facility just north of Ocala. Through rain. Past exit signs that reminded her of road trips long gone. through patches of farmland and silence. She checked in at the gate. Removed her shoes. Handed over her ID. And walked, step by step, through the place where her son now lived. Daniel was already seated when she entered the visitation room. Orange jumpsuit. Wrists cuffed to the table. He looked older. Thinner. But not hollow anymore. There was something steadier in him, something resigned but clear. Their eyes met. Neither of them smiled. She sat down across from him. At first, there were no words. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights above them, the faint scrape of shoes on concrete, the mechanical clunk of doors opening and closing in the distance. Then Eleanor spoke. "They gave you 25 years. Daniel nodded. "Yeah. You didn't even try to fight it." Another nod. "I didn't want to." She studied his face, the same jawline he'd had since he was 12, the same scar above his right eyebrow from when he fell off his bike. "Why?" she asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Because I didn't want to lie anymore. Not to them. Not to myself. Not to you. You could have told me." His voice broke a little. "And what would that have done? You'd have tried to protect me. I couldn't let you carry that, too." "I already carry it," she whispered. "Every single day." He looked down at his hands. The cuffs. The veins. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that," he said. I wanted to scare him. Make him leave. But he wouldn't stop smirking. Like he owned everything." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Do you hate me?" Daniel looked up. His eyes shimmered. "No. I hate what brought me to that point. I hate that I wasn't stronger. That I let myself become that." "Do you still love me?" she asked. Even now, she wanted to know. Daniel nodded slowly. "I never stopped. I just wish loving you hadn't hurt so much." Eleanor's eyes welled with tears. It was the first time she'd cried in years. "I didn't need saving," she said. "I needed someone to tell me the truth, even if it hurt. I tried. Not loud enough." He smiled faintly. "Remember when you used to check the locks before bed?" she asked suddenly. He laughed, a small, cracked sound. "You called me your little bodyguard. You were 5. He nodded. "And terrified of the dark." "That's not your job anymore," she said. She reached toward him, but the cuffs didn't let him move far. Still, her hand hovered close to his, fingers just inches apart. "Let go, Daniel," she said softly. "Not of me. But of the guilt." They sat like that until the guard came. Daniel stood first. Eleanor stood too. "I'll come again," she said. "You don't have to." "I know," she replied. "That's why I will." Daniel never left prison. He served his sentence quietly. Got his degree. Helped other inmates learn to read. He never asked for parole. Never remarried. Never stopped writing letters, though he stopped sending them. He just kept them in a journal, page after page, like a conversation that only he could hear. Eleanor passed away quietly in her sleep at 81. No pain. No drama. Just stillness. Michelle found her the next morning. Teacup still warm. Book open on the nightstand. Cat curled up beside her feet. They held a small service. Just family. No press. No reporters. No mention of the past. Just a few hymns, a few memories, and the scattering of ashes in the park where Eleanor used to take her children on Sundays, back before the grief, before the marriage, before the silence. Michelle kept the photo of Eleanor and Daniel, the one with the kite, on her mantel. Natalie, now grown, would sometimes ask about it. And Michelle would say, "That's my mom and my brother. They went through something most people never could have survived." And when Natalie asked what happened, Michelle would only say, "It was love. And love doesn't always save you." I retired the year Eleanor died. Packed up my files. Cleared my desk. One of the last things I placed in my box was Daniel's unsent letter, the one he wrote to his mother and never had the courage to mail. I don't know why I kept it all these years. Maybe because it reminded me that the line between right and wrong isn't always bright. Sometimes it's the width of a heartbeat. A choice made in anger. A silence kept too long. A shovel in the dark. A mother's need to feel alive again. A son's desperate belief that if he just hit hard enough, he could stop her from disappearing. But the truth? No one wins in stories like this. There are no heroes. No monsters. Just people. Frightened. Broken. Bleeding quietly beneath their ribs, trying not to drown in what they didn't say.